Hello and welcome to this episode. Perhaps we can begin with just settling and grounding our body, whether we are walking, standing or sitting or lying down. Just feel the body as it is in this moment. And then perhaps you can begin relaxing the body as well. Just notice if any part of the body is tense or is not comfortable. Just allow the body to be at ease as you listen. And this is even a form of compassion, you could say, for the body. You're noticing the body may not be in agony, or you may not be screaming in pain, but perhaps there's small things, small compassionate things you can do to the body to allow it to rest more, to be more at ease. Sometimes we think of compassion in a really big way. What big gesture can I do to be compassionate to myself? And it's often not in the doing, it's usually the how it's done. So even if it's in a really small way, you could just simply rotate your shoulders back, allow them to drop, and perhaps even just closing your eyes for just a few moments and taking a deep breath, and it's a moment of just soothing. I myself sometimes think of these things as a big task. Sometimes I have to be compassionate with myself. Where do I begin with that? And sometimes we feel we have to resolve things, or perhaps even in a thought or concept, it just feels like, I haven't got time to do that. I haven't got time to be compassionate with myself, or I haven't got time to relax. When relaxing can just be a very slow in-breath, following it in, and very slow cleansing out-breath. Maybe just before the meeting starts, or just before you start the car. First thing in the morning, you can give yourself some relaxation before engaging with the family. What small ways can you be kind to yourself? And this can spread to other people as well. You can show compassion in small ways as well. Even the very small things. Maybe, if something arises, you can see something's not tidy, you can perhaps just, without fuss, just collect it, put it together, put it away, or put something back. Perhaps there's a little more attention in listening to the other person this morning. Maybe there's a slight gap before giving your response, instead of cutting them off and saying what you want to say. Perhaps there's some more openness there. There's an an enjoyment in the listening, because you're not waiting for a gap to say what you want to say. There's just a full immersion, and maybe there's enjoyment in noticing that they're picking up on it. They're feeling safe and secure. And not in an ego sense of I'm doing this, I'm a good listener, but in the how something is being done. You're not worried about the end result. You're not waiting for a nice comment, a thank you for tidying this away or for this or that. You're just in the actual doing of it. Washing the few dishes that are there, slowly, mindfully. So you can perhaps just be aware of the subtle and simple ways of introducing compassion. One way I like to do it is just to give myself, a 10 minutes of just pure relaxation. So often resting my head back, closing my eyes, and not quite going asleep, but just giving the body and mind full rest. If I'm feeling exhausted or haven't been sleeping well, I allow myself throughout the day, when the tiredness comes, just allow the tiredness to be there, and just perhaps I need to take 5, 10 minutes, 15 minutes of just pure rest, where I'm not thinking, or just allowing the body and the mind just to. It's surprising how rejuvenating that can be. So we'll be returning to the power of now. And we were talking about impermanence and the cycles of life. That's what we were talking about previously. And this is where we will pick up from. The Buddha taught that even happiness is dukkha, a Pali word meaning suffering or unsatisfactoriness. It is inseparable from its opposite. This means that your happiness and unhappiness are in fact one. Only the illusion of time separates them. This is not being negative. It is simply reorganizing the nature of things so that you don't pursue an illusion for the rest of your life. Nor is it saying that you should no longer appreciate pleasant or beautiful things or conditions, but to seek something through them that they cannot give, an identity, a sense of permanency and fulfillment. This is a recipe for frustration and suffering. The whole advertising industry and consumer society would collapse if people became enlightened and no longer sought to find their identity through things. The more you seek happiness in this way, the more it will elude you. Nothing out there will ever satisfy you except temporarily and superficially, but you may need to experience many disillusionments before you realize that truth. Things and conditions can give you pleasure, but they will also give you pain. Things and conditions can give you pleasure, but they cannot give you joy. Nothing can give you joy. Joy is uncaused and arises from within as the joy of being. It is an essential part of the inner state of peace, the state that has been called the peace of God. It is your natural state, not something that you need to work hard for or struggle to attain. Many people never realize that there can be no salvation in anything they do, possess, or attain. Those who do realize it often become world-weary and depressed. If nothing can give you true fulfillment, what is there left to strive for? What is the point in anything? The Old Testament prophet must have arrived at such a realization when he wrote, "I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity and a striving after wind." When you reach this point, you are one step away from despair, and one step away from enlightenment. A Buddhist monk once told me, "All I have learned in the 20 years that I have been a monk, I can sum up in one sentence. All that arises passes away. This I know." What he meant, of course, was this: I have learned to offer no resistance to what is. I have learned to allow the present moment to be, and to accept the impermanent nature of all things and conditions. Thus have I found peace. To offer no resistance to life is to be in a state of grace, ease, and lightness. This state is then no longer dependent upon things being in a certain way, good or bad. It seems almost paradoxical, yet when your inner dependency on form is gone, the general conditions of your life, the outer forms, tend to improve greatly. Things, people, or conditions that you thought you needed for your happiness now come to you with no struggle or effort on your part, and you are free to enjoy and appreciate them while they last. All those things, of course, will still pass away. Cycles will come and go. But with dependency gone, there is no fear of loss anymore. Life flows with ease. The happiness that is derived from some secondary source is never very deep. It is only a pale reflection of the joy of being, the vibrant peace that you find within as you enter the state of non-resistance. Being takes you beyond the polar opposites of the mind and frees you from dependency on form. Even if everything were to collapse and crumble all around you, you would still feel a deep inner core of peace. You may not be happy, but you will be at peace. So there is a pause and reflect symbol here, so perhaps we can go over some of what we've just read. we can just go over the quote by the Buddhist monk. All I have learned in the 20 years that I have been a monk, I can sum up in one sentence. All that arises passes away. This I know. So, as Eckhart mentions, he's talking about the impermanence of things, of forms, thoughts, objects, emotions, memories. And perhaps if you look at how people live their life in this current time, the majority of people, they are in this cycle of impermanence, and they are perhaps not aware of that. They're continually trying to keep on top of it, and you just have to look at when a new phone comes out. At certain shops, you'll see a queue of people there, waiting in anticipation, in joy. Well, perhaps we shouldn't use the word joy in this instance, because joy in the meaning we've been reading is the permanent joy in being. So perhaps happiness will be a better word for it. And so they're anticipating, they're happy for the phone, and when the phone comes, they're in ecstasy, learning and using and identifying with the phone, that I have this now, this is mine. But then slowly, eventually, that happiness will fade, that will pass away. If you ask a phone, an iPhone user, or Android phones, and if you speak to them on the first day, they get the phone, and then perhaps speak to them 6 months down the line. What's different? What's happened? And being in the state of permanence, where you are aware of the unchanging, and you can watch the changing, you can actually observe the impermanence unfolding before you. Being in this place where there's no resistance, where you're not holding on to form, there's an ease and lightness of doing that. You're not invested, you're not going through the polarity of energy where one moment you're happy and then you're in sorrow. And here there is no investment of good and bad. And it's saying here that in this state of being, the things that you thought you needed now come to you with no struggle. There seems to be perhaps a manifesting energy when you are in this being place. Things you thought you needed, or perhaps if you had a desire for an achievement or a goal of some kind, or those seem to come to you then in that space of not needing. And you can, as Eckhart says here, enjoy and appreciate them, but you're not depending on them for your identity. You're not adding to yourself. You are already complete, and then something like this, a nice form comes along. Perhaps if you're, I write in my spare time, so perhaps a publishing contract comes along, and I'm not adding to that. I'm not saying, okay, now I'm a published writer, now I'm somebody. Now I have some worth, because now, I can tell people I'm a published writer. But perhaps that something like that may come when it is not needed, and I'm not looking to depend on that for some sort of value. Maybe something in yourself you can relate to that. There's something you want or feel like you need. and perhaps it will be the opposite. You're not struggling for effort and trying to get there by will, but there's a natural attraction, almost like when the tide comes in the ocean. There's a natural ease there. You're aware of the vast present space, and then there's this form that comes along, a form that used to be embodied by the desire for that form, the desire for that to happen. But now you can almost see it for what it is, and you can enjoy it and you can appreciate it, but you're not swept away by it or relying on it in any way. Okay, so perhaps we can have another minute or so of just allowing what we've read and discussed just to absorb, and perhaps in this moment connect to that permanence that you are here in this one moment, and just be aware of your own awareness. Be aware of your own presence in this moment. And I invite you just to close your eyes and rest and just simply be. Okay, so let's continue. And this section of the book is called Using and Relinquishing Negativity. All inner resistance is experienced as negativity in one form or another. All negativity is resistance. In this context, the two words are almost synonymous. Negativity ranges from irritation or impatience to fierce anger, from a depressed mood or sullen resentment to suicidal despair. Sometimes the resistance triggers the emotional pain body, in which case even a minor situation may produce intense negativity, such as anger, depression, or deep grief. The ego believes that through negativity it can manipulate reality and get what it wants. It believes that through it can attract a desirable condition or dissolve an undesirable one. A Course in Miracles rightly points out that whenever you are unhappy, there is the unconscious belief that the unhappiness buys you what you want. If you, the mind, did not believe that unhappiness works, why would you create it? The fact is, of course, that negativity does not work. Instead of attracting a desirable condition, it stops it from arising. Instead of dissolving an undesirable one, it keeps it in place. Its only useful function is that it strengthens the ego, and that is why the ego loves it. Once you have identified with some form of negativity, you do not want to let it go. And on a deeply unconscious level, you do not want positive change. It would threaten your identity as a depressed, angry, or hard done by person. You will then ignore, deny, or sabotage the positive in your life. This is a common phenomenon. It is also insane. Negativity is totally unnatural. It is a psychic pollutant, and there is a deep link between the poisoning and destruction of nature and the vast negativity that has accumulated in the collective human psyche. No other life form on the planet knows negativity, only humans, just as no other life form violates and poisons the earth that sustains it. Have you ever seen an unhappy flower or a stressed oak tree? Have you come across a depressed dolphin, a frog that has a problem with self-esteem, a cat that cannot relax, or a bird that carries hatred and resentment? The only animals that may occasionally experience something akin to negativity or show signs of neurotic behavior are those that live in close contact with humans and so link into the human mind and its insanity. Watch any plant or animal and let it teach you acceptance of what is. Surrender to the now. Let it teach you being. Let it teach you integrity, which means to be one, to be yourself, to be real. Let it teach you how to live and how to die, and how not to make living and dying into a problem. I have lived with several Zen masters, all of them cats. Even ducks have taught me important spiritual lessons. Just watching them is a meditation. How peacefully they float along, at ease with themselves, totally present in the now, dignified and perfect as only a mindless creature can be. Occasionally, however, two ducks will get into a fight, sometimes for no apparent reason, or because one duck has strayed into another's private space. The fight usually lasts only for a few seconds, and then the ducks separate, swim off in opposite directions, and vigorously flap their wings a few times. They then continue to swim on peacefully, as if the fight had never happened. When I observed that for the first time, I suddenly realized that by flapping their wings, they were releasing surplus energy, thus preventing it from becoming trapped in their body and turning into negativity. This is natural wisdom, and it is easy for them because they do not have a mind that keeps the past alive unnecessarily and then builds an identity around it. Question: couldn't a negative emotion also contain an important message? For example, if I often feel depressed, it may be a signal that there is something wrong with my life, and it may force me to look at my life situation and make some changes. So I need to listen to what the emotion is telling me and not just dismiss it as negative. This is the answer. Yes, recurring negative emotions do sometimes contain a message, as do illnesses. But any changes that you make, whether they have to do with your work, your relationships, or your surroundings, are ultimately only cosmetic unless they arise out of a change in your level of consciousness. And as far as that is concerned, it can only mean one thing: becoming more present. When you have reached a certain degree of presence, you don't need negativity anymore to tell you what is needed in your life situation. But as long as negativity is there, use it. Use it as a kind of signal that reminds you to be more present. Question: how do we stop negativity from arising? And how do we get rid of it once it is there? Answer: as I said, you stop it from arising by being fully present. But don't become discouraged. There are as yet few people on the planet who can sustain a state of continuous presence, although some are getting close to it. Soon, I believe, there will be many more. Whenever you notice that some form of negativity has arisen within you, look on it not as a failure, but as a helpful signal that is telling you, wake up, get out of your mind, be present. There is a novel by Aldous Huxley called Island, written in his later years when he became very interested in spiritual teachings. It tells the story of a man shipwrecked on a remote island, cut off from the rest of the world. This island contains a unique civilization. The unusual thing about it is that its inhabitants, unlike those of the rest of the world, are actually sane. The first thing the man notices are the colourful parrots perched in the trees, and they seem to be constantly croaking the words, attention, here and now, attention, here and now. We later learn that the islanders taught them these words in order to be reminded continuously to stay present. So whenever you feel negativity arising within you, whether caused by an external factor, a thought, or even nothing in particular that you are aware of, look on it as a voice saying, attention, here and now, wake up. Even the slightest irritation is significant and needs to be acknowledged and looked at. Otherwise, there will be a cumulative build-up of unobserved reactions. As I said before, you may be able to just drop it once you realize that you don't want to have this energy field inside you and that it serves no purpose. But then make sure that you drop it completely. If you cannot drop it, just accept that it is there and take your attention into the feeling, as I pointed out earlier. As an alternative to dropping a negative reaction, you can make it disappear by imagining yourself becoming transparent to the external cause of the reaction. I recommend that you practice it with little, even trivial things at first. Let's say that you are sitting quietly at home. Suddenly, there is the penetrating sound of a car alarm from across the street. Irritation arises. What is the purpose of the irritation? Nothing whatsoever. Why did you create it? You didn't. The mind did. It was totally automatic, totally unconscious. Why did the mind create it? Because it holds the unconscious belief that its resistance, which you experience as negativity or unhappiness in some form, or somehow dissolve the undesirable condition. This, of course, is a delusion. The resistance that it creates, the irritation or anger in this case, is far more disturbing than the original cause that it is attempting to dissolve. All this can be transformed into spiritual practice. Feel yourself becoming transparent, as it were, without the solidarity, as it were, without the solidity of a material body. Now allow the noise or whatever causes a negative reaction to pass right through you. It is no longer hitting a solid wall inside you. As I said, practice with little things first. The car alarm, the dog barking, the children screaming, the traffic jam. Instead of having a wall of resistance inside you that gets constantly and painfully hit by things that should not be happening, let everything pass through you. Somebody says something to you that is rude or designed to hurt. Instead of going into unconscious reaction and negativity, such as attack, defense, or withdrawal, you let it pass right through you. Offer no resistance. It is as if there is nobody there to get hurt anymore. That is forgiveness. In this way, you become invulnerable. You can still tell that person that his or her behavior is unacceptable if that is what you choose to do, but that person no longer has the power to control your inner state. You are then in your power, not in someone else's, nor are you run by your mind. Whether it is a car alarm, a rude person, a flood, an earthquake, or the loss of all your possessions, the resistance mechanism is the same. Okay, I'm just going to pause for a moment while I check my computer has not gone asleep and you're still with me. Let's have a look. Okay. So we continue with a question by the reader. I have been practicing meditation. I have been to workshops. I have read many books on spirituality. I try to be in a state of non-resistance. But if you ask me whether I have found true and lasting peace, lasting inner peace, my honest answer would have to be no. Why haven't I found it? What else can I do? Answer. You are still seeking outside, and you cannot get out of the seeking mode. Maybe the next workshop will have the answer. Maybe that new technique. To you, I would say, don't look for peace. Don't look for any other state than the one you are in now. Otherwise, you will set up inner conflict and unconscious resistance. Forgive yourself for not being at peace. The moment you completely accept your non-peace becomes transmuted into peace. Anything you accept fully will get you there, will take you into peace. This is the miracle of surrender. So there's another pause and reflect symbol there. So I have the feeling to perhaps follow that guidance and not read on for the moment. Perhaps it may be a good idea to not read on for this episode. Perhaps we can pick up where we've left off in this episode. So Eckhart here is talking about negativity, And he mentions here again, whenever negativity arises within you, whether, by an external factor, a thought, or even, he says, in nothing in particular, look on it as a voice saying, attention, here and now. So you can use that as a reminder to be present. And another pointer he uses, when this irritation arises, imagine you are transparent, so it's not hitting you in a sense. And so usually, if you are tensed, or in this metaphor, if you're solid, it would hit you and have an impact, and then there'll be a reaction to that. But in this pointing, he says, if you are transparent, imagine you are transparent, and that irritation or that anger or whatever that emotion is calling, that is calling for you to react to, that dog barking or that car alarm, he says as well, that let it pass through you as if there's nobody there for that impact to happen, for that to hit you. And there's nobody there to react to that. You are just simply present, aware of it happening. So he mentions that negativity to use that as your spiritual practice now. And I'm sure it's safe to say, a lot of us are not short on negativity happening, whether it's a negative thought arising or something external that's causing negativity to arise within you. And so perhaps you can, think about if there's times when there's always negativity, whether it's, maybe leaving the house, there's some anxiety there, and with what's happening now, perhaps that might be a common thing where it is for me when I get ready to leave my place. There's a bit of anxiety there of what's happening outside, and can I be affected by that when I leave? And perhaps that could be a moment there to be present. So when that fear or that anxious thought arises, I can perhaps think about, okay, attention, I need to be aware here in this moment, and I can let it pass through me instead of reacting to it, holding on to it, analysing it. And he mentions the ego enjoys doing this. It enjoys almost answering the door of thought and engaging in it, engaging in a negativity. You're allowing it to pass, or you're just simply being aware when that arises. And just covering the last question of this as well, when, perhaps a lot of us can relate to this, where we've been practicing meditation for a long time, we've been going to workshops, reading books, and we still haven't found lasting inner peace. Perhaps, when we read the book we feel peaceful, or when we meditate we feel peaceful, but afterwards it's lost, or that lasting peace is gone, or it evades us. We feel peaceful for the short term, and then suddenly the mind comes in again. And Eckhart is talking about surrendering here, not looking for peace or looking for that lasting peace, but just surrendering to the state that is in this moment. And when in that surrendering, a space will open up. There's a non-resistance there. And he talks about even forgiving yourself for not being at peace. And that is accepting that in this moment, okay, there isn't any peace. And in the accepting of that, often you may find an opening where there's some space around that state that you are experiencing. And I had this this morning, actually. as an example, one of my tasks today was to go to the post office, and there was a lot of anxiety there happening with that, of thoughts about what envelope should I choose, what's appropriate to keep the object I was sending, to keep it safe and secure. Will it be busy there? Will I just feel too anxious being in that environment? And then I said to myself, as I was leaving my place, I said, well, I can either do this in suffering, I can go to the post office and do this in suffering, or I can do this in a space of awareness, in a space of relaxation. And I could immediately feel some openness to what I was doing. I was feeling slightly more relaxed. It didn't get rid of the anxiety, but it reduced it. And I can feel that there was awareness with that. Okay, I am anxious in this moment. And I was just aware of the anxiety. I was allowing, surrendering to what was in that moment, which was, there's anxiety here. I can feel it in my stomach. I can feel it a bit in my chest. There's thoughts racing, and with that accepting, that surrendering, I wasn't so close to the anxiety. And perhaps using the pointer Eckhart mentioned about being transparent, some of me was becoming less, was becoming more transparent to it, so it wasn't hitting me as much as it was before. And so, in perhaps looking at this insight, perhaps as your practice matures, then something like this, perhaps it will hit me less in the future, and perhaps I'll be able to be more transparent to it. And that was just an example of what Eckhart was talking about, surrendering to what is in this moment. So I will leave it there for this episode, and we can continue on with this section about negativity and it being a spiritual practice. Thank you for joining me for today's episode. I wish you well as always, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Take care.